Have you ever felt like your entire existence is made of questions that echo into silence, as if life itself were waiting for you to ask the right one? What if what you call a challenge is not an obstacle, but a secret language the universe uses to awaken the part of you that has been sleeping for too long? Look around, not with your eyes, but with your being. Everything that hurts, everything you fear, everything you try to ignore is not against you. It is the call, the sacred tremor before transformation, and the moment you begin to hear it, you can no longer go back to pretending. Sartre whispered to us once, "Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself." But what if you've never truly chosen what to become? There is a strange comfort in suffering that makes us feel alive, even when it breaks us. And yet most people do not want to be free. They want to be safe. But safety is not salvation. Sartre taught us that freedom is a burden too heavy for the faint of soul. So we run from it. We hide in routines, in roles, in false identities, and spiritual cages decorated with the words of others. But something in you, something deep and ancient, is beginning to stir. That restless breath inside your chest is not fear, it is memory. A memory of who you were before the world told you what to become. What if your pain is the mirror, and your despair, the beginning? You see, transformation is not a fire that burns from outside in. It is a collapse, a sacred disintegration. What you lose in the process was never yours. What remains is truth. But truth, as Sartre knew well, is not a destination. It is a confrontation, a slow unveiling of what you tried to bury beneath choices you never really made. You will be tempted in this very moment to look away, to close this window, to dismiss these words as too poetic, too abstract. But you are not here by accident. This is your summons, and not everyone is ready to receive it. Are you? What lies ahead is not explanation. It is experience. Not answers, but sacred confusion. We will walk together through shadows, not to escape them, but to understand why they were placed there. To begin with, each secret revealed in this video is not a solution. It is a mirror. And in each mirror, a part of you will be asked to die so something deeper can be born. This is not a teaching. This is a remembering. And remember this: transformation is not something you achieve. It is something you allow. And if you stay, truly stay, something irreversible will awaken in you. So I ask you now, not with logic, but with reverence, what if this is the moment your soul has been waiting for? What if everything that has hurt you, every closed door, every unanswered prayer, was simply guiding you here to these words, to this moment, to yourself? Do not look for comfort, look for truth. For truth will not make you feel better. It will make you feel real. The question is not, can you overcome the challenges of life? The real question is, are you finally willing to meet yourself completely, courageously, without masks? If you are, then let us begin. What if the pain you've carried for so long is not the enemy, but the messenger? What if the ache beneath your chest, that silent hum of dread before dawn, is not a flaw in your soul, but a sacred signal that your essence is stirring beneath the rubble of borrowed identities? You were not born broken. You were taught to feel fractured by voices that feared your fullness. Sartre whispered a terrifying truth to those who dared to listen. There is no script, no divine map, no predestined path. And so, the suffering you feel may not be the weight of failure, but the contraction before awakening. There is a moment before the first word, a breath before action, where you exist beyond all names. In that hush, your existence speaks louder than language, and your freedom pulses like an unseen current under still waters. You were told to wait for permission, to walk only where footprints already mark the earth. But Sartre invites you to burn the trail. He insists, you are not essence awaiting discovery. You are a furnace of becoming. You are not here to remember who you were. You are here to choose, over and over, who you must now dare to be. How many times have you looked into a mirror and failed to see yourself? Not the face, not the skin, but the you that weeps in silence when the lights go out. You perform roles so expertly, child, lover, worker, believer, until the performance becomes your second skin and the original voice beneath goes mute from neglect. Sartre tears away the mask with merciless compassion. You are not a character. You are the author. The world may applaud your illusions, but only you can rescue your truth from beneath the rubble of applause. But here lies the unbearable cost: freedom. Real, raw, unfiltered freedom. Not the kind sold in slogans or packaged in choices between brands. True freedom, Sartre says, is the terror of having no excuse, no one to blame, no map but the one you sketch with trembling fingers in the dark. When you choose, you are not just choosing for yourself, you are declaring what it means to be human. And suddenly, every hesitation becomes a prayer, every decision a declaration of existence. That burden is not light, but it is holy. You may feel a resistance right now, a tightness in the belly, a clenching in the mind. That is not fear. That is the soul remembering its size. You are not meant to live bent, compressed, apologetic. That discomfort is sacred. It is the body's way of mourning its own diminishment. Sartre offers no comfort, no salvation, only confrontation. You are not safe, you are not shielded, but you are real. And in the rawness of that reality, in the trembling ground beneath your feet, a new kind of courage is born. Not loud, but enduring. Have you noticed the hunger that never leaves? The ache that persists even when the bills are paid and the bed is warm? That is not ingratitude. It is the divine calling itself through absence. Sartre believed that in a world without God, man must become the source of value. That longing you feel is not emptiness. It is the echo of your own unclaimed power. You are not waiting to be chosen by the universe. The universe is waiting for you to choose yourself. Not once, but in every breath, every act, every silent vow. And so you stand now in the threshold between who you were told to be and who you dare to become. This is not a transformation of light alone, but of fire, a sacred burning that leaves no lie unscorched. Do not mistake this moment for a pause. It is the genesis of a new ontology. Sartre does not offer a map. He offers a mirror. Look deeply, not to see what you are, but to witness what you refuse to be any longer. The world within you is larger than the world around you, and that inner vastness has just begun to stir. Stay here. Do not rush. Let this discomfort wash through you like baptism. Let the silence between your thoughts stretch wide enough to hear the voice beneath all others. You are not being invited to change. You are being summoned to remember what it feels like to choose. Not from fear, not from duty, but from the trembling clarity that only truth provides. This is only the first breath of your reckoning. The fire has only just been lit. Do not look away. There comes a moment, and it is never announced, when what once gave us comfort begins to tremble beneath our feet. Perhaps it is not the world that changes, but the veil that covered it which finally slips. What once felt permanent now appears fragile. The certainty you held in your hands begins to evaporate like mist before the morning sun. You ask yourself in silence if everything you believed in was merely borrowed from voices that were never your own. And this doubt, this sacred fracture, is the first doorway. Not a rupture, but a gentle unraveling of illusions so carefully dressed as truths. And what if your greatest pain was not an enemy, but a compass? Sartre's voice murmurs between the lines of your discontent. Existence precedes essence. You were not born to fulfill a script written by others. Your suffering is not a mistake. It is a protest against the cages you've accepted in exchange for belonging. The anxiety that wakes you at night, the heaviness that dulls your days, they are not signs of weakness, but messages. And now, for the first time, you are listening. Not to the world outside, but to the tremor within that says, there is more. There is another way to live, and it begins where your fear begins. To walk this path is not to acquire answers, but to shed the wrong questions. Who told you that you must be strong all the time? Who convinced you that doubt was failure? Who taught you to bury your own voice beneath layers of compliance? Sartre did not offer comfort. He offered confrontation, not with others, but with the self you abandoned in exchange for peace. And now, that self, bruised but breathing, begins to stir. It does not speak yet, but you feel its presence, like the silent gravity that keeps the stars in place. This presence is your awakening, not from a dream, but into one. You were not born to merely survive routines you secretly despise. You were not created to fulfill roles passed down like chains, disguised as heritage. The moment you look at your reflection and no longer recognize the person staring back, that is not despair. That is initiation. The self is not found in perfection, but in the rebellion against all the masks you were forced to wear. And now, one by one, those masks begin to crack. You feel it, a strange mix of grief and liberation, as if something is dying inside you, but not your soul. It's the performance that suffocated it. Every time you made yourself smaller to fit someone's expectations, a part of you faded. Every time you silenced your longing, bowed to fear, or nodded when you should have cried, you were taught that safety mattered more than truth. But now, the old strategies no longer work. The pain no longer goes away with distraction. The emptiness cannot be filled with noise. What rises in you now is not anger. It is mourning. You are grieving the life you never lived, the choices you never made, the courage you postponed. And in this grief lies the seed of your transformation. You are not lost. You are being invited. Each discomfort is a doorway. Each silence is a question. Each regret is a map to something forgotten. And as you step further into the unknown, something ancient begins to return. Not a new version of you, but the one you buried long. Ego beneath obedience and fear. This is not reinvention, this is resurrection. Sartre would call it the authentic self. Not the one that pleases, but the one that chooses. And to choose, finally, without apology, is the first act of freedom. There is no one coming to save you. But this is not tragedy. This is power. You are the writer, the actor, and the audience of your life. And perhaps this is what frightened you all along. The realization that you are free. Terribly, beautifully free. And with that freedom comes the unbearable weight of responsibility. But also the exquisite privilege to begin again. Not tomorrow, not in some imagined future, but now, in this breath, in this choice, in this awakening. This is your revolt against fate, and it begins not with noise, but with silence so deep it becomes prayer. Let yourself pause. Let yourself weep. Let yourself remember what it feels like to be alive without a script. You are not broken. You are breaking open, and through those cracks, light begins to enter. Not to blind you, but to show you that the path has always been within. Not outside, not in others, but buried beneath your forgetfulness. The philosopher never promised peace. He promised truth. And the truth is, you are the answer you have been searching for. Now the only question that remains is, will you dare to live from that truth? There comes a moment, subtle, almost imperceptible, when the silence inside you speaks louder than the chaos around. It is not the silence of emptiness, but of an impending revelation, as if something long dormant within your being is preparing to awaken. Sartre would say this is not fate nor divine plan, but the raw, irreducible truth of your own freedom pressing against the walls of your habitual self. Every echo of uncertainty, every shadow of fear, is but a veil over that truth. And you feel now, for the first time, that the veil is thinning. You begin to notice how every choice you once called small has been echoing through the corridors of your life. A yes spoken without conviction, a no murmured out of fear, a dream postponed for a tomorrow that never came. But today, in this quiet reckoning, you realize existence is not something you inhabit, it is something you create. And every moment you delay that creation, a part of you dissolves into someone else's narrative. The anguish you carry is not punishment. It is the pressure of the freedom you've denied yourself. Beneath your daily rituals, beneath the masks you wear with such precision, there is a yearning. Not for pleasure, not even for happiness, but for meaning, raw, difficult, unfiltered meaning. That which cannot be bought, taught, or inherited. It can only be born through confrontation, with your past, with your emptiness, with the unbearable weight of being. You don't need another answer. You need a mirror that refuses to lie. And this, Sartre whispers, is the terrible and beautiful gift of existence. You are both the sculptor and the stone. What if nothing is written? What if the script you keep following, the expectations, the limitations, the fears, are nothing but illusions constructed by your own reluctance to face the abyss? And what if the abyss once faced is not a void but a doorway? There is no freedom without vertigo, no rebirth without loss. This is not a motivational idea. It is a spiritual disintegration. You do not rise by adding, you rise by shedding. Everything that is not you must fall away, even your name, if it no longer holds truth. And yet, it is not easy. The process is brutal, not because existence is cruel, but because truth is unrelenting. It does not comfort. It purifies. The life you thought you wanted must die to reveal the one your soul came to live. Sartre does not offer comfort, but courage. He does not promise healing, but honesty. In this sacred friction between who you were and who you are becoming, the real transformation begins. Not loudly, not in fireworks, but in the quiet yes you whisper to the unknown. And so you begin to see your suffering differently, not as something to escape, but as something sacred, a teacher, a passage. Every tear you've hidden has been carrying a truth too pure for your old self to bear. Now, you are strong enough. Now you are hollow enough to be filled by something real, not certainty, not control, but presence, radical, unshakable presence, where you no longer chase peace, but become it. It is here, in this vulnerable awakening, that you finally meet yourself. Not the version crafted for approval, but the one that waited in silence while you performed 1,000 roles. That self has no title, no agenda, no shame, only clarity. And it doesn't shout. It doesn't beg. It simply looks at you, eyes wide open, and asks, "Are you ready now? Are you willing to stop surviving and begin existing, fully, painfully, beautifully?" And if you are, then understand this. Everything you need is already within, not in theory, in essence. The path is not forward. The path is inward, into the dark forest of your fears, into the unspoken memories, into the breathless spaces between thoughts. Sartre's philosophy is not a map, it's a match, and you now are the fire it longs to ignite. You thought the enemy was out there, in people, in circumstances, in fate. But what if the true resistance lives within? A quiet, unexamined agreement you made with fear long ago. I will shrink if you protect me, and fear kept its word. They gave you safety, but robbed you of aliveness. It built walls around your soul, calling them wisdom, maturity, realism. But they were prisons, not protection. You traded your fire for silence, and now silence burns you from the inside. You learned to speak with words that were not yours, to dream dreams that were not born of your soul, but borrowed from someone else's survival. You mastered the art of appearing strong, appearing good, appearing on the right path. But in the quiet moments, when no one is watching, a whisper rises. This isn't it. Sartre does not offer comfort here. He offers confrontation. The only freedom is to stop pretending. And the only truth is the one that scorches before it sets you free. This is the sacred violence of awakening. It shatters the mirror you've been using to admire your disguise. It doesn't gently nudge you into a new season. It rips the illusion apart with reverent cruelty. Because what you truly are cannot be born while you still cling to who you are not. To become new, you must first become nothing. That is the terrifying gift of existence. It gives you the power to destroy yourself, not in death, but in rebirth. And so the question echoes, are you willing to be unmade? Not reshaped, not improved, but undone, unraveled, unmasked. This is not about self-development. This is about self-demolition, the kind that leaves only what is eternal within you standing. Sartre invites you not to fix yourself, but to strip away every false layer until the raw, wild essence beneath can finally breathe. No applause, no audience, just you, naked in your truth, rising from your own ruins. There is a strange peace that follows this storm, not soft, but sacred. Not sweet, but whole. You begin to see with new eyes. Your pain wasn't punishment, it was preparation. The loneliness wasn't abandonment. It was a sacred silence, waiting for you to remember yourself. Every delay, every heartbreak, every dead end, it wasn't waste. It was initiation. You were not being broken. You were being emptied. Now, finally, you are ready to be filled with something real. And that realness isn't found in success or validation. It's not in becoming someone admired. It's in becoming someone authentic, even if it means being misunderstood, even if it means walking alone. The courage to exist freely is the rarest kind, because it requires you to let go of every image you've protected, to choose truth over comfort, presence over performance. And that is the cost of liberation. Everything that once made you feel safe must be surrendered. But in surrender, you don't lose yourself. You reclaim yourself. The self you left behind when you chose approval over passion. The self that knew how to dance before it knew how to perform. The self that trusted silence before it needed certainty. Sartre reminds us, you are not here to fit in. You are here to become. And becoming is not a path. It is a fire. You do not walk it, you endure it, until what remains can no longer be called a version of you, but the origin of you. So now, you stand at the edge, not of failure, not of despair, but of awakening. The question is no longer, what should I do, but what must I release to finally be who I am? The chains were never around your wrists. They were around your perception, and the key was never outside you. It was forged in every moment you dared to feel fully. Sartre does not offer you salvation. He offers you the match. And the match is lit in your longing. Let it burn. What happens after the fire? After you've watched the illusion of yourself collapse into ash, after the roles, identities, and masks have melted in the fierce honesty of your own gaze, a strange stillness enters. Not silence, but something deeper, a spiritual nakedness. It is here that many turn back, frightened by the emptiness they find. But Sartre whispers, this is not emptiness. It is the space where the real can finally emerge. You are not lost, you are unbound. You see, for so long you lived within scripts written by others, family expectations, cultural definitions, religious instructions. They told you what to want, who to be, how to measure your worth. And maybe you followed them well. Maybe you became everything they said was right. But the aching didn't stop. Because truth doesn't live in obedience. It lives in courage. And courage begins when you are willing to disappoint everyone, including yourself, to stop betraying your soul. In this sacred space of disobedience, the first whispers of authentic desire begin to surface. They don't shout. They don't demand. They come as fragile flickers, tender longings that seem irrational, inconvenient, even foolish. A longing to rest, a longing to dance, a longing to disappear from a world that only sees your usefulness. These aren't weaknesses. These are fragments of your truth trying to find their way home. If you listen closely, they will tell you who you really are. But listening is dangerous, because once you truly hear, you can no longer pretend. You cannot unknow your own longing, and that longing will ask you to change everything. Sartre does not romanticize this. He names it for what it is, anguish, not suffering, anguish. The sacred tension between the self you were told to be and the self that is waiting, trembling, behind your fear. This is where transformation begins, not with action, but with attention. Attention to what hurts, attention to what yearns, attention to what has been silenced for too long. Most people avoid this moment. They numb it, distract it, spiritualize it. But you are still here, still listening. That means something in you is ready. Not ready to be fixed, ready to be found. The parts of you that were once judged as too much or too different are not flaws. They are clues. Sacred evidence of the life that only you were meant to live. The world does not need a better version of who you were told to be. It needs the version of you that was buried beneath survival. Sartre reminds us, existence precedes essence. You are not born with meaning, you are born with freedom. Meaning is not inherited, it is invented, it is chosen. And that choosing is what makes life unbearable and beautiful at the same time. You are not the product of destiny. You are the result of choice, your choice. Every day, in every breath, you are choosing who to be. Even when you say, "I have no choice," you are still choosing, and therein lies both the burden and the liberation. So now the invitation is clear. Not to become better, but to become honest. To say yes when your soul says yes, even if the world says no. To say no when your body tightens, even if your past demands obedience. To no longer live by borrowed truths. To write your own scripture in the language of your longing. And yes, it will cost you. You may lose the approval of many, but you will gain the presence of one, yourself. And that is the only presence that can fill the void. This is the raw, trembling liberation Sartre offered not in sermons but in silence, not in answers, but in anguish, not in perfection, but in permission to be flawed, afraid, unfinished, and still worthy of existence. You do not need to understand the whole path. You only need to take one honest step. And in that step, a new world begins, not out there, but within. So take it, even if your knees shake, even if your voice trembles. The ground beneath you is not falling apart. It is being reborn. There comes a moment quiet and irreversible, when you stop waiting for someone to rescue you. When the myth of the Savior dissolves, and you are left only with yourself, your hands, your breath, your memory. It is a lonely awakening, but it is sacred. Sartre would call it the beginning of responsibility, Not in the moral sense, but in the existential one. For the first time, you are not reacting to life. You are choosing to create it, even if with trembling hands and shattered dreams. You realize the world owes you nothing, not justice, not clarity, not love. And in that realization, something radical emerges. The power to give yourself what was denied. Not because it's easy, but because no one else can do it. You cannot rewrite your childhood, but you can stop reenacting it. You cannot erase betrayal, but you can refuse to betray yourself again. You cannot make others see you, but you can choose to no longer be invisible to yourself. But freedom is not light. It is heavy. It does not feel like wings. It feels like bricks. Like holding the weight of your own life in your hands for the first time, without apology or denial. And yet, in that unbearable weight, you find a strange grace. The grace of not needing to perform, not needing to be understood, just being raw, real, human. Sartre knew that the price of freedom was anguish, but he also knew it is the only path that leads to authenticity. Perhaps no one ever told you this. It's okay to not know who you are yet. It's okay if you've built a life that now feels foreign. It's okay to burn it down, not in bitterness, but in reverence. Because the person you were becoming was not alive. They were surviving, pleasing, performing. But you were born for more. Not more success, more truth. Not more control, more presence. And the soul does not blossom under control. It blooms in surrender. That's the paradox, isn't it? You fight for freedom only to realize that freedom asks you to let go of certainty, of recognition, of the desire to be good, perfect, impressive. And instead, you are asked to become something terrifying and holy, yourself. Your real self. Not the spiritual one, not the healed one, the messy, flawed, aching one who doesn't need to earn their place here. Because you never had to. You were always enough. Even when the world told you otherwise, you begin to see that much of what you feared losing was never truly yours. The admiration, the stability, the roles, they were costumes, beautiful but temporary. Sartre calls us to face this impermanence with courage, not despair. To love fiercely, knowing everything ends. To show up honestly, knowing you might be rejected. Because in this brief life, there is no time for falseness. There is only now. And in this now, you can choose to be real, even if it costs everything you once thought you needed. So here you are, not healed, but healing. Not perfect, but present. Not fearless, but willing. And that willingness, that trembling yes to your own becoming, is the most sacred act you can offer. You are not late. You are not behind. You are exactly where you need to be, with exactly the pain and longing required to open the next door. And you don't have to open it all at once. Just place your hand on the handle. Feel its truth. Breathe. And trust that what calls you from the other side is you. Sartre never promised comfort. He promised clarity, the kind that slices through illusion and leaves only what matters. And what matters, in the end, is not what you built, but what you became. Not what you achieved, but what you chose. So choose now. Choose yourself. Choose your breath. Choose your truth, even if it costs you certainty. Because beyond that cost, beyond that trembling threshold, is a life that no one can give you, and no one can take away. There is a moment when silence becomes unbearable, not because it is empty, but because it is full. Full of everything you tried to escape. Full of the words you never said. Full of the life you postponed while waiting for permission to begin. And when you finally sit in that silence, not to judge it, but to listen, you hear something faint but powerful, the sound of yourself returning, of your soul knocking softly from the inside. You may have thought healing would feel like light, But Sartre teaches us otherwise. Healing often begins in darkness, not the kind that swallows, but the kind that strips. It removes what is not essential. It confronts you with what you buried beneath years of performance and politeness. And in that stripping away, what remains is not weakness. It is the raw material of your true self. The version of you that was never touched by shame, even when the world tried to brand you with it. You are not a mistake waiting to be corrected. You are a question longing to be lived. Sartre would remind us, existence precedes essence. Meaning comes after, not before, you take the first step. So you don't need to know where you're going. You only need to walk. You only need to breathe, feel, and take responsibility for what is yours, no matter how tangled, no matter how painful. Responsibility is not punishment. It is freedom disguised as fire. And yes, that fire will burn. It will burn illusions. It will burn attachments. It will burn every excuse you ever used to remain small. But it will not burn you. It will forge you into someone who no longer needs to be chosen. Into someone who no longer begs to be understood. Into someone who, finally, belongs to themselves. This is not ego. This is not arrogance. This is sovereignty. And sovereignty is the highest form of prayer. In a world that thrives on distraction, your stillness is an act of rebellion. In a culture addicted to validation, your refusal to explain yourself is sacred. Sartre invites us to live without masks, not because it is comfortable, but because it is true. And the truth, though it wounds, also liberates. So remove the mask, the one you wear when you're afraid to be judged, the one you wear to be loved, the one you wear even when you're alone. Let your face be seen, not by others, but by yourself. You may feel fragile. Good. Fragility is not weakness. It is sensitivity to what matters. It is a sign that your soul is awake. And yes, the world may not understand. But that is no longer your concern. You were not born to be understood. You were born to be whole. And wholeness includes your contradictions, your grief, your doubt. Let them be here. Let them sit beside your joy and your longing. There is room for all of it. There always was. So stop chasing peace. Stop chasing meaning. Let them chase you for once. Let them find you when you are no longer trying to be worthy. When you are no longer striving to arrive. Sartre would call this transcendence. Not the kind that escapes the world, but the kind that re-enters it with open eyes and unguarded heart. The kind that sees everything as it is, and still chooses to love, not perfectly, not always, but sincerely. You are not here to impress God. You are here to meet Him within yourself, in your breath, in your brokenness, in the quiet bravery of showing up to your own life. Not with answers, but with presence. Not with certainty, but with surrender. And maybe that's the real miracle. Not being saved from the fire, but discovering you can walk through it and come out more yourself than ever before. There comes a moment in the journey where words begin to dissolve, where explanations no longer satisfy, and the soul leans forward, not to understand, but to feel. This is not the place for answers. It is the space before them, the breath before truth emerges, the pause where something ancient within you recognizes that transformation is not something you do, it's something you allow. And in that stillness, Sartre whispers not instructions, but a question. Are you ready to face yourself without disguise, without delay? What if the greatest prison was not outside you, but inside your beliefs? What if everything that has kept you stuck, the fear, the guilt, the self-sabotage, was not punishment, but protection? What if your most destructive patterns were just your soul trying to shield you from a truth too bright to hold all at once? Sartre teaches us that freedom is not comfort. Freedom is confrontation. It is standing naked in front of the mirror of existence and not looking away. Even when what you see undoes everything you thought you were, you are not here to be rescued. You are here to remember that you were never lost. Even in your darkest hours, you were always held, not by external hands, but by the unseen force of consciousness that refused to let you forget who you are. And maybe that's the greatest betrayal. Not the ones others inflicted, but the one you performed against your own light. Every time you chose silence over truth, numbness over presence, survival over soul. But that ends now. Not because someone told you to change, not because you were shamed into waking up, but because the weight of pretending has become heavier than the risk of becoming. You are not the story you were given. You are not the role you rehearsed. You are the moment you choose to begin again, with trembling hands, with tear-streaked eyes, with a heart that still dares to hope. That choice is holy. That choice is rebellion. That choice is you. Sartre would remind us that we are condemned to be free, not as a curse, but as a calling. And in that freedom lies both terror and ecstasy. The terror of having no excuses left, and the ecstasy of finally realizing you don't need any. You are not waiting for fate. You are creating it. With each breath, with each choice, with each act of radical honesty that reclaims your name from the rubble of expectation. Let your fear come. Let your doubt sit at the table. Let every voice that once told you you are not enough echo until it becomes absurd. You no longer need to silence them. You only need to stop believing them. They are echoes, not prophecies. Ghosts, not gods. And when you finally see that, when you finally say, I choose to live, even with trembling knees, the spell is broken. The path does not appear. It is created with your every step. What if salvation is not a place, but a person? And that person is you, choosing yourself again and again. What if healing is not arriving, but allowing yourself to be seen, even in the chaos? What if God does not live in perfection, but in the sacred mess of becoming? What if every scar you carry is not proof of failure, but a doorway to grace? These are not metaphors. These are reminders, sacred fragments of a truth you've always known, but were too afraid to say aloud. And now, here you are. Not complete, not resolved, but ready. Ready to face the fire without flinching. Ready to stand in your own presence without apology. Ready to walk forward, not because you know the way, but because you have become the way. You are not alone. You never were. And though this is not the end, it is the edge of something vast, something sacred, something eternal, waiting to be named by the only voice that matters, your own. You have not merely listened, you have remembered. Something ancient within you stirred, not because of these words, but because these words pointed to what was already alive in the silence behind them. Jean-Paul Sartre did not offer salvation. He offered a mirror. And in that reflection, you may have seen not who you were, but who you could become if you stopped running from yourself. What you felt here was not performance, but presence. And presence never ends. It deepens. Perhaps, now, the challenges of life no longer feel like barriers, but invitations. Each sorrow a threshold, each confusion a map. Not because they became easier, but because you became different. Stronger not in armor, but in openness. Wiser not by knowing more, but by letting go of what never belonged to your truth. You did not overcome the darkness. You walked into it, eyes open, and found your own hand reaching back. Nothing outside you was ever meant to complete you. The answers you seek are not in the heavens or in books or in rituals. They are etched in the rhythm of your breath, in the sacred fatigue of your longing, in the quiet bravery it takes to continue, even when nothing makes sense, especially when nothing makes sense. Because to live is to choose meaning, again and again, even in the void. What Sartre revealed was not a doctrine, but a responsibility. that you are the author of your freedom, that to exist is not to wait, but to respond, to engage with life, fiercely and vulnerably, as if everything mattered. Because it does. Every moment, every gesture, every silent decision you make when no one is watching. That is where your truth is born. That is where destiny begins. Not as fate, but as fidelity to yourself. So if today you feel the quiet fire stirring, let it burn. Let it burn away the masks, the numbness, the delay. Let it clear the path between who you are and who you've always been beneath the noise. And if you tremble, good. That means you are close to something real. That means you are on sacred ground. That means you are alive, not in theory, but in spirit. You may never have all the answers, but you now carry better questions. Questions that walk beside you. Questions that disturb and heal, that break and build. Do not rush to solve them. Let them reshape you. Let them become the compass of your days. Because those who live with questions live with depth, and depth is where transformation begins. And now, if you feel something stirring, not in your mind, but in the quiet center of your chest, let it speak. Not in words, but in action. Like a sacred vow whispered to your own soul. If this message reached you, then it was meant for you. Let the world know. Write in the comments, reveals how to overcome life's toughest, as your way of honoring the truth you just remembered. Share this with those you know are silently drowning. Subscribe not just to a channel, but to the unfolding of something larger. You are not a viewer, you are a voice. And in the stillness that follows, may one truth remain, not loud, but unshakable. You are not here to be saved. You are here to awaken.